today we are going to be going over our Week 3 power rankings for the 2025 NFL season. Before we get into the video, make sure to leave a like if you enjoy and subscribe if you're new. But let's get into these Week 3 power rankings. So our first tier of teams is a little bit of a bigger tier of teams. We have the Browns at 32, the Saints at 31, the Titans at 30, the Giants at 29, the Dolphins at 28, and the Panthers at 27. I think these are pretty safely the worst teams in the league. There's some other teams you could argue maybe go in this tier as well. I had the Browns at 32. It was a toss-up between them and the Saints, but the Saints have been pretty competitive in their two games against the Cardinals and the Niners. I know the Niners are a little banged up, but they could have won both those games, so I didn't want to put them quite at the bottom, whereas the Browns, they were competitive in that Bengals game week 1, but it was the Bengals week 1, and then they got pretty blown out by the Ravens in week 2. So I put them at 32, Titans at 30, similar to the Saints. Now, they weren't very competitive against the Rams, but the Rams are one of the best teams in the league, but they were competitive against a Broncos team. So I gave them 30, Saints 31, Browns 32. Those three teams are kind of clumped in the same grouping, and then the next set of three teams in this tier is the Giants, Dolphins, and Panthers. Giants looked terrible against Washington and looked very good against Dallas. Miami looked terrible against the Colts and looked pretty good against the Patriots, and the Panthers looked pretty bad against Jacksonville and looked decent towards the end against the Cardinals. So that's kind of how I split those three teams up, the top three teams. It was tough, honestly, to rank these six teams, but that's why I kind of just clumped them all together as the tier of probably the worst teams in the league. You can honestly go any order, at least I think, for like Panthers through Giants could be interchanged anywhere, and Titans through Browns. Next tier, we have the Jets at 26, the Patriots at 25, the Raiders at 24, and the Bears at 23. Now, these teams are in that worse-ish tier, but a little bit better. Now, the Jets were questionable. The Jets were at risk of getting put down lower on this list, but they were competitive against the Steelers team, and they ran into one of the best teams in the league in the Bills, with Justin Fields getting hurt halfway through the game. So I don't want to fully overreact on that Jets blowout loss to the Bills quite yet, but they are on the brink of going down a few more tiers. Patriots at 25 and Raiders at 24, very interchangeable. I just give the Raiders the bump over the Patriots because they beat them in week 1. But the Raiders honestly didn't look that good against the Chargers. Again, the only reason they went up is because they've beaten the Patriots, and the Jets potentially also didn't look very good against the Bills either. So I gave the Raiders a bump, even though I was not impressed at all with what they did against the Chargers. And the Patriots, while it isn't necessarily a good Dolphins team, they played very well, and they ended up beating the Dolphins. So they went up a spot. And then the Bears went down 3 spots after their very disappointing game versus the Lions. It wasn't honestly the best game against the Vikings either week 1. Like, they scored right away, and then the offense became stagnant. The defense played well in spurts, but they then let them down towards the end of the game. So they were already a little bit iffy for me, and then they get blown out by a Lions team, who I'm not going to say are bad. I think they just had a bad game against a really good Packers team, but the Bears didn't look good at all. So I moved them down 3 spots into that second tier. Then the third tier of teams we have is the Jags at 22, the Cardinals at 21, the Texans at 20, and the Vikings at 19. Jags at 22, I know they lost to the Bengals, and they lost to their backup, and Trevor Lawrence didn't play the best. But again, the Bears didn't look great, the Raiders didn't look great, the Jets didn't look great. So that's why they went up a spot, even though I wasn't super impressed with them week 2. Honestly, I don't think they had their best performance week 1 either. Cardinals at 21, similar to the Jags, 2 teams that beat the Panthers as some of their wins this season, but they didn't do it in the most impressive fashion. I didn't want to lower the Cardinals because what do you want them to do, lose? But I just wasn't super impressed with how they won the game. But again, they won, unlike teams like the Jags or the Bears or the Raiders, so they stayed at 21. And then the 2 teams here that took 2 of the bigger decreases in my power rankings were the Texans and the Vikings. Texans did not look good against the Rams, but I gave them the benefit of doubt. It's a good Rams team, and I still believed in the Texans. And then they didn't look too good against the Buccaneers, at least offensively. Their special teams was good. Their defense was very good. But they went down 4 spots just because they haven't looked good. That O-line hasn't been great. The run game hasn't been good. And then the Vikings at 19. Now, I know it's a big drop off for the Vikings, but I think every team I put in front of the Vikings, I think is currently better, including one team you don't see is the Falcons, because they beat them. So I obviously had to have them over there. But I wasn't super impressed with how they played against the Bears. They squeaked out a win, and then they didn't look good in the slightest against the Falcons, who are a good team, but I think they definitely should have done better in that game against the Falcons. So that's why they went down 9 spots here in my power rankings. Then the next tier of teams, we have the Colts at 18, the Cowboys at 17, the Falcons at 16, Bengals 15, and the Steelers at 14. Colts at 18 continue to impress. Defense continues to play great. Daniel Jones continues to play great. They're 2-0. The reason I didn't jump them up even more is because I've been impressed with the Cowboys. I've been impressed with the Falcons. And I think you could argue that there's an argument that maybe they shouldn't have been able to win that game against the Broncos with that leverage penalty that was called on that kick. So I'm giving the Colts their credit. I moved them up 4 spots, but I'm not 100% bought in on them yet, but I'm close to it. Cowboys at 17, as I mentioned before, I've really been impressed with the Cowboys. They almost beat the Eagles week 1, and then they go in a shootout versus the Giants and get the win there. Brandon Aubrey might be the best player on that team. Their defense definitely needs some fixing. They need to play a little better, but I like the Cowboys. Falcons at 16, very impressed with their performance against the Vikings. Bijan Robinson looks great. The Falcons' defense has made a drastic improvement. They were probably one of the more bottom defenses in the league, and right now they're playing like one of the best defenses in the league. We'll see if that can continue throughout the season, but right now I've been impressed with the Falcons. Bengals at 15, they beat a Jags team with Jake Browning, so I don't want to knock them for that, but I just don't know how the future and the rest of their season will go with Jake Browning at quarterback. Their defense actually hasn't been that bad so far this year. Now, granted, they've played the Browns and the Jags, so we'll see what happens when they play. Well, I guess they play Carson Wentz next week, but we'll see what happens when they get matched up against a very good offense, but I haven't been too disappointed with the Bengals defense. And then the Steelers at 14, you lose to the Seahawks. You'll see in a little bit that loss to the Seahawks is why they're here at 14. It wasn't the worst performance. I know their defense didn't do much against the Jets, but it was decent against the Seahawks. They only allowed 24 points because 7 of them came from the Caleb Johnson touchdown that the Seahawks had. So defense didn't play terrible. Aaron Rodgers looks okay. Definitely didn't look as good as he did against the Jets, but wasn't bad by any means until towards the end of the game. The run game, though, for Pittsburgh, Jaylen Warren had a great game. But again, as I mentioned before here, when we look at our next tier with the Seahawks at 13, Niners at 12, Chiefs at 11, and Broncos at 10. Seahawks, they got the nod over the Steelers because they beat them in that game. Very good game from Seattle. Their defense played a good game against San Fran, and they played another good game against Pittsburgh, but it's the offense of Seattle that stepped up a little bit more than what they did against San Fran. So I was impressed with what I've seen from the Seahawks. Niners at 12, similar case with the Seahawks and Steelers as they beat the Seahawks in week 1. Mac Jones actually played pretty good. I know it was against the Saints, and they squeaked out a win against the Saints, but they're banged up. They don't have Ayuk. They don't have Kittle. They don't have Purdy. And Mac Jones played pretty well, and I think if this team can get healthy again, they can be very good. Chiefs at 11. Disappointing start to the season for the Chiefs, but the reason they're still high is because, one, they were ranked second in my power rankings before the season even started, and they lost to the Eagles, who are the best team or top 3 team in the league, and they lost to the Chargers, who are also arguably a top 5 team in the league. So they've had a very tough start to the season, but if they were to lose to the Giants, that's when we'll have some question marks about the Chiefs, if they start 0-3 with a loss to the Giants. But right now, I don't want to put them too far because they've almost beaten 2 very good teams. And the Broncos at 10, they didn't look the best against the Titans, at least offensively, and then they go and lose to the Colts. Now, the reason they're above the Colts is because they were 9th before the game and the Colts were 22nd. And again, it was a close game. You could argue that the Broncos should have won. I think this is the only 2 teams that the loser of the matchup is above the winner. Might be mistaken there. But the Broncos haven't been the most impressive to start the season. Again, their team is very good, so I don't want to put them too far, but I am a little questionable about the Broncos to start this season. Next tier, we have the Lions at 9, the Rams at 8, Commanders at 7, and the Buccaneers at 6. Lions at 9, big bounce back win. After a tough loss to Green Bay, they go and host the Bears and absolutely blow them out. The reason I still have them at 9 is just because we don't know how good the Bears are. And I can't forget the performance they had against the Packers, but they definitely looked a lot closer to their old self. They looked exactly like their old self. So if they can continue that, they'll definitely keep going up the rankings. Rams at 8. I know it was the Titans, but I was very impressed with what I saw from them against the Titans. Also very impressed with what I saw from them against the Texans in week 1. I feel like they've been under the radar, pretty solid team. So they're at 8. Commanders at 7, very underwhelming performance against the Packers on Thursday night. Again, they were ranked high going into the week, so I don't want to push them too far because the Packers are clearly one of the best teams in the league. But I do think they'll get a bounce back performance. Only if Jaden Daniels is playing, though. We'll see if he's healthy. And then the Bucs at 6, very good, impressive win, I think, against the Texans on Monday night. They had a close win against the Falcons week 1. The defense has played very good. I've been really impressed with the defense. And that offense, I mean, they don't have Chris Godwin or Jalen McMillan. It's just Ibuka and Mike Evans out there. But Baker's playing well. The whole offense is playing well. Overall, just a good team. And once they get Tristan Wirfs and Godwin and McMillan, all these guys back, they're going to be one of the better teams. And then our final tier, the 5 best teams in the league, is the Chargers at 5, Packers at 4, Ravens at 3, Eagles at 2, and the Bills at 1. Chargers, very impressive win against the Chiefs week 1 and a dominant victory against the Raiders in week 2. Herbert's looked great. Quentin Johnston's played great. The defense has played great. We'll see how they can do once with no Khalil Mack, but it didn't look like to bother them too much against the Raiders, so we'll see what that does moving forward. Packers at 4. I know they had a very good, impressive win against a good Commanders team, but I kept them at 4 just because every team above them also won against good teams or in dominant fashion. So I kept the Packers at 4, although you could argue that 4 through 1 could be interchanged in any order. Ravens at 3, same thing. They took care of business against the Browns team. Lamar continues to play great. And now with the Eagles and Bills, I did push the Eagles down to 2. I know I've talked about how if the number 1 team keeps winning, I don't want to push them down too much. But honestly, they haven't looked the most impressive to begin the season. So but the Bills, I think, have been the best team in the league. As I said before, though, 1 through 4 could be interchanged in any way. Like, if you told me the Packers were the best team, I wouldn't argue with you. If you told me the Ravens, the Eagles, or the Bills, I wouldn't argue with you. This is just how I went with the order for Week 3. And that will officially conclude our Week 3 power rankings. Let me know in the comment section below some of your thoughts about these power rankings, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.